Hey, what's going on, everybody? Happy Monday. Welcome to another edition here of Mean Streets, live on our FTN Network YouTube page. Just looking on iTunes and Spotify. Always appreciate your support. Chris Meaney here with you. A lot to talk about on today's program. We're going to dive into tonight's football game, the Monday Night Football game here tonight between the Jets and the Chargers. We're going to recap all the action from Week 9, a couple takeaways. We have 4 teams on bye, 3 of them very good. Kansas City, Miami, Philadelphia, and the Rams. But there's a lot of quarterbacks, right? Hurts and Mahomes we got to replace this week. Some pretty good wide receivers, too. And Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, my guy, Rashee Rice. Not a fantastic day from him in Germany, but he did find the end zone yet again. Something that we can be proud of because we continue to call touchdown props. And just overall, like, this guy continues to trend up, although Mahomes did spread it around again in that game against the Miami Dolphins. So a lot to talk about here on the program. You guys have any questions for tonight's game? We can get into it. The waiver wire is pretty thin. We're not going to come at you with a bunch of rankings and things. We'll address some things, some takeaways, just talking about the same sort of players like Stash Mitchell, Stash, Zach Charbonnet. There's a couple scenarios we can talk about. The biggest injury that I'm seeing, I mean, there's 2. Daniel Jones, unfortunately, his season is now over. It's been a mess for the Giants. The Giants, heading into the week, they were dead last in passing yards per game. They were dead last in rushing yards per game, or actually just behind Las Vegas. And Josh Jacobs had a good game, but 155 passing yards per game and 276 overall yards per game, followed by 13 points per game. This is an offense that couldn't do anything. And now over the past couple of weeks, Waller gone, and now Daniel Jones gone as well. Dallas Goedert fractured his wrist or his arm. I think that's confirmed now. He's going for some tests today, expected to undergo surgery as soon as today. He'll be placed on IR, I would imagine, but a real possibility for him to return and come back before even your fantasy football playoffs begin. It could be a 4 to 5 week thing. As we head into week 10, the quarterback play will just be as bad, right? Because of some of the guys that we talked about that aren't Tua gone, Mahomes and Jalen. Those are 3 of the top 5, 6 quarterbacks. We want to give a lot of love to CJ Stroud on this show. It looks fantastic. And we have some NHL picks and some props as well. You guys are hanging out live. Smash the like button. You have any questions, any comments? You guys know the drill. You can leave them. We can address them here on the show. Always circling back on these videos. I will address any questions that you have. Rate, review, subscribe to our YouTube page. We have the college basketball season beginning here today. We have Mike Randall, the college basketball betting show. He is live on our FTN Network YouTube page. I think he just wrapped up, actually. Get some college basketball shows with him. Hoops with Noops. We have Aaron Schatz in his show twice a week. Jake Seeley, of course, in All in Football twice a week as well. Lots of stuff happening. Happy Monday. Let's get to Week 10. Week 9 was brutal. Week 9 was, from a fantasy perspective, there was a lot of low projections. There's a lot of bad quarterback play. The first half of the games and the first set of games were really, really bad. But I thought it was a pretty good betting weekend for us over at ftnbets.com. We were on the positive side of things in terms of props. We nailed a couple things. CeeDee Lamb, no answer. The Eagles had no answer for CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson, 2 things that I stressed on this show, which is really nice to see. And we did get some start and some sits right, but it was some ugly football. You're right. And there was some big players with some poor performances, but there was a lot of some big time performances as well. So it was a weird week. And I don't know if this week gets any better, Kyle, with just some of the quarterback play. I was really pumping Darren Hall on the Sirius XM show. It was a good opening drive for him. Actually 2 good drives, and then he went down with the injury. But Joshua Dobbs was a big story for me as well into the weekend. The fact that he was just traded midweek to the Vikings and then having to get thrown into that game. And I don't know, like, if you asked him to say truthfully how many offensive linemen could he have named in his huddle halfway through that game, I don't know if he could have named all of those guys. I don't know if he had. I would say no, he didn't have like all the snap counts down and just learning guys' names and building a rapport. He was running around for his life, but good on the Vikings. They started 1-4. They're now 5-4. They're in the playoff picture. We will talk playoff picture and some Super Bowl and MVP odds again towards the end of the show. Daily Handle, Jordan Allen. Happy Monday, Means, and everybody. Let's go. College basketball is finally here. Yeah, we have Kutri, an article over at ftmbets.com talking about his favorite futures. We have a very, very strong college basketball squad. Welcome in. How's it going? Managed to get Connor. Thoughts? I'm not sure what Connor that is. Is it James? I would assume it's probably James. Yeah, I mean, he's going to be back soon, I think. And I believe we'll see Kyler probably next week as well, this week. And the usage has been there for him. A lot of guys, right? Keontae Ingram doesn't have it. Imari's hurt now. So, yeah, getting Connor's a guy you're going to get with some usage. I still view him as an RB2, but volume is king. It's a very bad football team, but if it is James, you're going to get some opportunities there. Let's talk about tonight before we get into some stuff from last night. And we'll have, like I said, some NHL picks. Yesterday was a great day on the ice in the NHL. We had a few picks, right? I want to give some love, I guess, to the Dawson Mercer since we're on the NHL. Dawson Mercer last night, 2 units for him to pick up a point, picked up his first point of the season. Now with Jack Hughes week to week and Nico Hischier sideline, Dawson Mercer is going to have a role, whether that's between Meyer and Toffoli or on that second line with Jesper Bratt. He's definitely going to have a significant role. He was a hot waiver wire pickup for us this week, and we had him. We had Frank Vetrano again for shots, and Timo Meyer is going to start to shoot the puck more. We got to get involved with Timo Meyer's shot props now that Hughes is going to be sidelined. It's going to be like the San Jose days, 4 or 5 pucks towards the goal. And we've seen that now in the 2 games without Jack Hughes. And then another big waiver wire pickup was Marco Rossi for me up on that top line. I mean, he's a former first-round pick. He's hardly played in the NHL over the past 3 years, but getting an opportunity over the past couple of days with Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Boldy. And those are Minnesota's 2 best players. And Marco Rossi's on a little bit of a heater. I think he's a must-add in fantasy hockey. But we do have some picks. There's only 4 games on the ice. We'll get to it in a little bit. We want to talk about tonight's football game to wrap up Week 9 before we take a look at Week 10. We have the Chargers and the Jets. We have 3.5 spread here in favor of Los Angeles. The total at 39.5, just like every other game this week. A low total hovering around the 40 mark here. And the Jets at home as dogs at plus 160. They have a 4-3 record, and the Chargers are 3-4. I have a lean to the Jets covering this one. In fact, this is what I picked on Friday's show, and this is what I picked in my own spreads week. And hopefully we can finish strong because I'm only on the wrong side of 2 spreads so far this week. So let's get this one. The Saints did not get that Saints one. We had 7 on the show, so that was a push, but it moved to 7.5. Anyways, man, Saints need a new kicker. Anyways, about tonight. This Jets defense has just kept them in so many games this year. All of them. They beat the Bills at home. They beat the Eagles at home. They almost beat the Chiefs at home. And I think this Chargers team is overrated. I'm not impressed that they beat up on a Bears squad last week. This defense is not good. Heading into this week, they've allowed 23 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, which is the number 1 mark in football. They've allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers. They have a top 10 quarterback completion percentage against. They've allowed the most yards per attempt at 7.8. They've allowed the 9th most points per game overall. They're inside the top 10 in fantasy points allowed to tight ends as well. I'm just not impressed with this Chargers defense. You can run the ball on the Jets, but Austin Eckler hasn't been super efficient carrying the rock since he's returned. I like him tonight. We'll talk about his props in just a little bit, but don't get me wrong. He's a fantastic running back. 14 for 27, 14 for 45, 15 for 29. Doesn't seem to be, the spot last week against the Bears was really, really good. This spot against the Jets is good. I mean, this is a team that's allowed the top 10 in terms of fantasy points allowed to the running back position. They've allowed the 2nd most rushing yards per game overall. And even points to tight ends. Good spot here. But they definitely bottle down wide receivers. Just 16 fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. This is a defense that can lock you down. They are top 5 in total DVOA defense here, and against the pass, they are number 6 overall. So I think this is a tough spot for Herbert. I mentioned some of the quarterbacks that the Jets have played this year. I mean, they made Mahomes look pretty silly. That was a game where Zach Wilson had more completions, touchdowns, and passing yards than Mahomes. That was the first time in Mahomes' career a quarterback has outplayed him like that. Made Jalen Hurts look silly, right? 3-4 turnovers in that game. Josh Allen with some turnovers. So I just think this defense can keep things tight here today. And we're not asking for a Jets win. I think the Chargers find a way to win this football game, but I think it's by like 1, 2, 3 points. I don't think they're going to blow them out. And I really like the way that Breece Hall is playing football right now. They took the training wheels off of him. They found a way to get the ball in Garrett Wilson's hands, moving him around the slot here and there. So Zach Wilson's also made some nice throws. I know that last week was ugly against the Giants, but he really did make some nice throws when it mattered, coming back late in that game in the fourth quarter, and then in overtime making some throws as well. So this is a big game for both teams, especially with the Bills losing. Take a look at the playoff picture here inside the AFC. We have the Chiefs at 7-2, the Ravens at 7-2, the Jags at 6-2. A great game, coming this week between Jacksonville and San Francisco. The Dolphins at 6-3, the Steelers and the Browns at 5-3, and the Bengals. Look at everybody inside the AFC North in the playoff spot right now. The Ravens, the Steelers, the Browns, and the Bengals in the hunt. The Jets at 4-3 here. The Bills have dropped down to the 9th seed inside the AFC, and they have some tough games coming up. They're going to have to travel to the lake and play the Eagles. They got a game against the 49ers, I believe, and they also have a game against the Dallas Cowboys, the Texans, and CJ Stroud. Hello. Man, want to give this kid just a lot of credit setting rookie records. I've said it so many times, and I don't want to be sour on Bryce Young, but this should have been the first overall pick. We've said it. I've been saying it before the draft. I said it after the draft. It has nothing to do with missing a 4-1 bet on CJ Stroud to be the first pick off the board. This guy he just has it, right? He just has it. 470 and 5 touchdowns yesterday, coming back a couple times late in that game. And you got to love all the weapons that the Texans have. You have to love them. Tank Dell leads everybody in terms of snaps. Yesterday was great to see. He's been fantastic. Missed a couple games with the concussion. I think maybe 1.5, and then the bye was mixed in there. But he's been good. Dalton Schultz has been really good since the slow starts of the season. We know that Nico Collins has a high ceiling there as well. Not getting anything on the ground, really, because Dameon Pierce has been hurt, and Singletary's not really that back that's going to rack up like 80-plus rushing yards or be super efficient. Stroud is just dropping back, and he's making things happen. He's got a 14-1 touchdown to interception ratio. Man, I was smiling on my face too, because he is the quarterback that I have the most exposure to over at Underdog Fantasy. He was just sitting there all the time as like quarterback 26, 27. When I take a third quarterback, he's right there for me. But it's been very, very impressive. And, he's faced some tough teams. Like I think the Ravens at his very first game was really his worst game. It was his worst fantasy showing. We know how good Baltimore is. He had to face Baltimore week 1 in Baltimore. But ever since then, like 384-2, 280-2, 306-2, bit of an off game against the Falcons there, 249-2, loses a tight one. The Saints, tough defense, found a way to toss 2 touchdowns and for his team to win that football game. Definitely not a great game against Carolina, against Bryce Young. But last week, maybe a little bit on the Bucs defense. That secondary, how could you give up? Like, man, what was it, under 30 seconds? And he found a way to march them all the way up the field. I think it was 45 seconds, and he ended up getting it done. So you look at this playoff picture here, massive game for both squads here today. The Chargers are not even on this list, right? Everybody's favorite team, the Chargers, this is the year and Super Bowl squad and yada, yada. This is a must-win game for them. If the Jets win this football game here tonight, they go to 5-3, and they're in this cluster with the Steelers, the Browns, and the Bengals, and that would be not great for the Bills. And the Jets and the Dolphins they're going to face each other 2 times here in the next few weeks. So that's going to be very telling on the AFC picture as well. But a massive game here tonight, and I will lean with the Jets. Give me the +3.5 for the Jets. Keep this thing close, maybe a 17-14 type game. I do believe it's going to be low scoring. No Joshua Palmer here today, and Sauce Gardner was going to be on Palmer. So I think that, Quentin Johnson certainly going to get an opportunity here. I want to see him get involved more targets, running more routes, maybe more looks. But ultimately, this is a bad spot. He's not grading out well in our wide receiver cornerback matchup tool. We had Joshua Palmer as a sit, but now, he's not going to suit up here today. So I do believe as we transition here over to some props that it will be a big game for Austin Eckler. I think they're going to have to lean on Eckler here a little bit, but Quentin Johnson should see DJ Reed. DJ Reed is among the leaders in terms of not allowing yards per route run covered, 0.66. It's one of the best spots. Lines up 94% of the time on the right side of the field. We've seen Quentin Johnson all over, 35% on the right, 24% in the slot, 40% in the left side of the field. Fehoko is going to have, more snaps, maybe running more routes, but I would say that he's on. Sauce Gardner is going to be on him. And then Keenan Allen in the slot, the best possible spot against Michael Carter II, but still not grading out fantastic in our wide receiver cornerback matchup tool. So as we transition here to some props, this is what I'm thinking now. We've had Breece Hall in the bet tracker since Thursday at over 16.5 receiving yards. So the line has moved. If you've already bet this, great. We'll ride this one out and see if he can get to 17.5 receiving yards tonight. But the line has moved. If you just want to, get involved here tonight, I would take anything, honestly, over 23.5. We haven't projected for over 25 receiving yards. The last couple of games have been really good for Breece Hall out of the backfield. We'll talk about just the receiving work so far. He's had at least 3 catches in 4 straight games. Over his last 2 games, he's got 14 targets, 11 grabs, and over 130 receiving yards. So 5 for 54, 6 for 76. Had the receiving touchdown last week. His catch prop is juiced at -150. Vegas telling us that he's probably going to have 3 grabs here. And I would expect him to have 3 grabs because of what I just said. At least 3 catches in 4 straight games. And just like the usage that he's getting. We heard the report in week 5 that your training wheels would come off. 22 carries for $177. Against the Eagles, a really stout run defense, 12 for 39. Still found a way to get a touchdown. He's got touchdowns in 3 straight games. I think he finds the end zone again tonight. And then against the Giants, it was a bit surprising, only 12 for 17. Couldn't get anything done. It was a very, very sloppy game. A little bit of brutal weather there, but he should have had a better day there. But at least he made up for it through the air. So I personally don't mind the over 2.5 grabs at -150, but I just didn't want to give that as a single play. I do have a little bit of a long shot in the tracker over at Bet365 for Breece Hall to have 4+ receptions and 25+ receiving yards. That pays +260. I know our free bet of the day is -145 for Breece Hall to have 3 grabs. We have him for 3 grabs and, like I said, over 25 receiving yards. But I'm just going to double down on what I already have, over 16.5 receiving yards and 19.5. Can I take anything over 23.5 today? A little bit of a sprinkle on the 4+ receptions and 25+ receiving yards for Breece Hall. And then Austin Eckler, as I mentioned, I think that he's going to have to be leaned on here a little bit. You can run on the Jets. We'll see if he can find some consistency. He had the breakout game through the air last week, but just in case he can't get anything done through the air, I'm taking the over on the rush and the receiving combined here for Austin Eckler, because the last 3 games, 27, 45, and 29 rushing yards, and in a good spot last week to rack up some rack up some rushing yards against the Bears bats. He didn't really do it, but he had 7 grabs on 8 targets for 94 receiving yards. So over 83.5 rush and receiving for Austin Eckler. And the over 4.5 catches is +100 over at BetMGM. He's only had 4 games this season, and he's only cleared 4.5 once. 4 in week 1, 4 when he came back against the Cowboys, just the 1 against the Chiefs, which I do believe will be an outlier. And then the 7 last week. I just feel like with Palmer out and the Jets' strong secondary, and the fact that I got to think that the game plan tonight is to try to blanket, Keenan Allen, try to double him as much. Like, you're not going to be too worried about some of these other weapons like Fehoko, and I think maybe Quentin Johnson. Maybe you take a stab on the receiving yards or something like that, but it really is a tough spot against DJ Reed. Like, these Jets corners don't give up anything against good teams, right? Like, really good wide receivers. They've been able to kind of bottle them up. So I think we could see a few catches out of the backfield for Austin Eckler, and I don't mind the receiving yard prop either, but I'm just going to take the catches here. And as for Garrett Wilson, it's been a lot better than I thought it would be since Aaron Rodgers went down week 1. it's been okay. If you look at the last 4 games for him, 9 catches on 14 targets for 60 yards. That was week 4 against the Chiefs. Against the Broncos, 7 targets, only caught 3 of them for 54 yards, but they did win that game. They didn't have to throw too much against the crappy Broncos. Against the Eagles, 12 targets, 8 grabs, and 90 receiving yards. That was week 6. On the bye, week 7. Then he faces the Giants last week, 13 targets, 7 grabs, and 100 receiving yards. I love seeing the volume. This is what we saw last year as well. 68 targets. He started the season 5, 8, and 9. And the last 4 games, 14, 7, 12, and 13, averaging well over 10 targets per game. So I think he's going to get that again. It's really the only Jets wide receiver that I like. I think the offense is going to run through Wilson's going to run through Breece Hall over 5.5 catches at plus 125. On the other side, I think the offense will run through Mr. Austin Eckler. I was thinking about Keenan Allen here. Even though the spot is really tough, I don't want to give too much here today. Like the Jets to cover, and I like those props that I just mentioned. But Keenan Allen, for 7 grabs, it does seem like a lot, but 8, 18, 7, 4, and 8 over the last couple of games, 74 targets on the season. I would lean to the over on that one. I think if you have Keenan, you could be a little bit worried here about the production tonight. I don't know how many fantasy points you need, but it could be tough. Josh in the house, decent bench assets are Everett, Jameson, and Pop Douglas. Okay, I like it. Oh, gotcha. I missed the first part. Would you do this trade in a 20-team PPR? Oh, man, I love this stuff. 20-team PPR. Trading away Christian Kirk for Javonte Williams and Higgins. My roster is Lamar, JT, Aaron Jones, Tyreek, DJ. Got a pretty good squad here for a 20-team PPR league. You got Lamar, Jonathan Taylor, Aaron Jones, Tyreek, DJ Moore, Kittle, and Christian Kirk. So trading away Christian Kirk for Javonte. Let's see. So you get Javonte as your third back here, and Higgins, or just one of the other. Decent bench assets are Everett, Jameson, Pop Douglas. So yeah, I think I like this. I mean, certainly would rather Higgins than Christian Kirk. Great game from T. Higgins, right? Again, we're on the Bengals here. This is what the Bengals do. Look out for Cincinnati. We talked about Burrow as a long shot MVP. Maybe the Bengals is like a sprinkle to win the Super Bowl as well. Any trade that allows me to get T. Higgins, they've already had the bye, looks healthy, came at the right time. Burrow's healthy. T. Higgins, I would do this. I would rather, I think, T, and then you roll with Tyreek, T, and DJ Moore. DJ Moore really needs Justin Fields back. I mean, this guy's unstartable. And, Bijan had a really good game, I thought, in the Dome against the Saints, but it's really tough to trust him at the moment. Seems to be going to Mooney, and Kmet definitely is his guy. But I would make that trade. I would do that. I mean, I suppose it wouldn't hurt to have running back depth in a 20-team PPR league. So if you feel like you want Javonte here in this spot, Jonathan Taylor is like the man now in the Colts system. Zach Moss, didn't play as much. I know he's been dealing with something, but Aaron Jones had a nice breakout campaign there too last week. So I get it. Having the running back depth may be more valuable to you in a 20-team PPR league, but I like the look of your roster come playoff time with Lamar, JT, Aaron Jones, Tyreek, and T. Higgins mixed in with Kittle. I kind of like what you got going on there. CJ Stroud is a PTP, man. He gets it done on the big stage and no interceptions yesterday. I mean, he only has one game with an interception, and it came against the Saints defense. So yeah, man, there's just, I don't know. I know I don't want to get into it too much because I just sound like a broken record. But yeah, a lot of people, Jordan is saying, a lot of people told me I was crazy for saying CJ isn't better than Bryce and should not be drafted ahead. So you don't think CJ is better than Bryce? I think CJ is better than Bryce. I've always thought that he was better than Bryce, but it still is we're only halfway into it. And I think the situation may be slightly better for CJ. I don't know. The offensive line is not great on either team. Just really neither team can generate anything on the ground, but CJ just makes good decisions, man. When I saw him play the Bulldogs last year, against that defense, I was just very impressed with the decision making. He's very accurate. And man, he made some really nice throws again yesterday. He's 100% a franchise quarterback. Good job on the Texans. Other teams were absolutely snoozing here. The Raiders should have moved up and been aggressive. So, yeah, the great draft from the Texans. And a lot of people were like, whoa, all those draft picks, yada, yada. Like, man, they got themselves a quarterback. They got themselves a weapon in Tank Dell. Nico Collins is a nice underrated piece. Dalton, they got some things going on, man. CJ Stroud's great. Great. Seth, hey Means, I was at that Birds game yesterday. It might have been the most electric regular season game I've ever been to in any sport. Man, I would say like my nerves, man. That game last night, I think a couple things. I think the Eagles escaped with a victory, and I think Dallas let one slip. I think the Cowboys probably should have won that game. I think the Birds were really good in the third quarter, but man, they got the bye at the right time, right? For Dallas Goedert with the fractured arm. We saw Bradbury and Slay go down in the final drive there. Jalen Hurts definitely dealing with the knee injury. Devontae Smith hurt himself, late in the game as well. But the Cowboys, what I will say is that if there was any concerns about Dak and this Cowboys team going into the link and not moving the football, that is wiped now. That is wiped clean. These two teams are going to play each other again in a couple of weeks. I think Dallas is going to get that game at home. But it was a big game for Philadelphia now, 2.5 game lead inside the division because the schedule after the bye, right? Kansas City, Monday Night Football, that's going to be a good one. But in KC, then home to, I think, the Bills and then the Niners, then the Cowboys, then into Seattle. So it's tough here, but a big game for Philadelphia. And that was a really entertaining football game. Dak played awesome, man. Dak played fantastic. The Eagles continue to struggle in the secondary. Dak picked them apart. They bottled up Tony Pollard like we thought was going to happen. But yeah, moving forward, they're going to have to fix things in the secondary because that's a big glaring hole at the moment. And they're going to have to try to figure out how to stop CeeDee Lamb because these two teams may just meet again and it may just be at the link. Speaking of the NFC, playoff picture here. Eagles at 8-1, a pretty cool stat that I saw on ESPN last night when it comes to the Eagles in back-to-back years now, 8-1. Over the last 30 years, there are 4 teams that have started 8-1 and better in consecutive seasons. The last team to do it, the 2005-06 Colts, they went on to win a Super Bowl in year number 2 of the 8-1. The Broncos in 96-98, they had 8-1 starts. The Broncos won the Super Bowl in year number 2 of the 8-1. And then the Dallas Cowboys in 1994-1995, they won the Super Bowl in year number 2 of 8-1. So what does that mean? Does it mean the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl? Because the last 3 teams to go 8-1 in consecutive years have won the Super Bowl in year number 2. It's possible, but they are up at the top right now at 8-1. And I would put them at the top in terms of my power rankings. I still think the Niners are number 2. I would go Philly, San Fran, and Dallas and Detroit. It's kind of right there for me with both of those squads. And on the other side, I still would put KC 1, Baltimore 2 as the top 2 teams. And I've always been pro Cincinnati over Baltimore over Buffalo. And we'll see what happens there. But here, the playoff picture for the NFC: Philadelphia at 8-1, the Lions at 6-2, 49ers at 5-3, the Saints at 5-4, the Seahawks at 5-3, as well as the Cowboys. The Vikings started off 1-4, and they are 5-4, facing a lot of adversity. Kind of like where they're at in the hunt. The Commanders, the Falcons, and the Buccaneers there at 3-5. So things aren't. The teams are not as powerful inside the NFC. It certainly doesn't feel like that when I flip over to the AFC. Right, these powerhouse defenses, I think, too, like the Steelers. I know the secondaries give up big plays. Porter Jr. is like definitely legit, and they can get after the quarterback. Just don't like the offense at all. Cleveland, Deshaun coming back. We haven't seen a whole lot of Deshaun, but Amari Cooper and Njoku, those guys had great games, which you expect. Kareem Hunt scored a touchdown again, something we had on this show. I think that's 4 straight games, 5 touchdowns over the last 4. It's basically been a full-on committee timeshare there sprinkled in with Hunt and Jerome Ford. But the Dolphins' explosiveness, again, losing to another good team, lost to the Bills, a loss to the Chiefs, a loss to the Eagles, 2 losing to good teams last year. Really interested to see how they'll fare against the Jets. I think they need both of those ones. Definitely need to split. For me to feel like this is a legit squad, I need to see them beat a good defense. Kansas City's defense showed up But yeah, the Jags I believe in at 6-2. The Bengals believe in at 5-3 here, getting into a good groove here. The Browns defense legit. See what we'll see what Watson can give them in the second half of the season. And then the Jets defense is going to keep them in a lot of games. And I just don't know about Aaron Rodgers, and he's going to be ready, but the Jets are going to hang around for sure. And the Bills may be in trouble. They may be in trouble. And the Texans, a really nice story for Houston, 4-4 here. One of the worst football teams last season, but a great story. Got them in the hunt and competitive. I don't think they'll make the playoffs, but they are hanging around. It's nice to see. But over here in the NFC, this is the Commanders and the Falcons and the Bucks and the Vikings. Realistically, teams I just don't believe in. Like Seattle, just smacked in the mouth against Baltimore. It's just such a good squad. But definitely like the Saints, and I think that they will win the division and they'll make the playoffs. If the playoffs started today, we would see the Niners and the Cowboys yet again, and Seattle going into New Orleans. We'd have the Eagles with the first round bye there. The Cowboys don't want to face the 49ers. They got to find a way to get in that 5 spot, take a trip to the Superdome, or to face the Falcons. They got to find a way to get in that 5 spot there, avoid the 49ers. And this, I mean, everybody, right? The Seahawks want to find a way to hang on to that 5 spot, or maybe host the Niners in that 3 spot, or host the Cowboys or something like that. And the Lions, I think, are well on their way, even though the Vikings are 5-4. The Lions schedule is pretty soft the rest of the way. So I think that they'll find a way to, host a playoff game in Detroit and maybe host against that 7 seed, whether it's the Vikings, Falcons, Commanders, Bucks, or potentially the Seahawks there. And I'm sure we'll see a whole lot of this on Monday Night Football next week. Monday Night Football, Chiefs and Eagles. What is this Philly girl Taylor Swift? Was she's going to rock KC gear against the Birds? Oh, man, that's going to be – she should rock a half jersey like Mama Kelsey, half Travis and half Jason. Can't believe I brought that up. Let's take a look at Week 10 here. Quick look at Week 10. We'll tie in some waiver wire stuff, and we'll wrap up some NHL props and some picks. Just want to take a look at the schedule here. So we have KC, the Rams, the Dolphins, and the Eagles all on bye. So again, some good quarterbacks like that are not going to be playing. Mahomes and Tua and Jalen, and some good wide receivers and AJ and Devontae and Hill and Waddle and Kupp and Nakua, even though Kupp and Nakua clearly need Matthew Stafford under center. Nakua got some looks at least, but the rapport is just so awesome with Stafford and Kupp that it just can't be replicated by an average quarterback and below average quarterback in Ripon. Who am I to call him below average in my basement? And then no Kelsey and Mahomes here and Rashee Rice. So we take a look here at the schedule, and we start. Of course, it'll all wrap up tonight. And then we start to dive into Week 10. And if you thought the quarterback play was bad in Week 9, it's going to be pretty bad again in Week 10. But it starts off here with Thursday Night Football with the Bears and with Carolina. I'll kind of mix in some takeaways from Week 9 with some snap counts, mixed in with some start and sits. But again, it's very, very early here. We're not going to be Mean Streets won't be live tomorrow. We'll do Dangle Bet Silly and focus in on the massive slate in the NHL, but we will be back before Thursday Night Football to identify some start and sits and things like that. And I'll go over some streamers at quarterback and tight end, but this is why I like to bring this up, to kind of just an early look at the schedule and some takeaways from it. But the Bears backfield is the biggest takeaway for me, like heading into this game, because you can run on Carolina. Like, Carolina is a team that cannot stop the run. They have struggled really all year, and just like won't really look into. I mean, we just saw it, right? With man, get my stuff together here. Carolina. Let me just bring up my notes here. Quick time. Yeah, Carolina inside the top 3 in terms of rushing yards allowed. And this was a big miss by me was Jonathan Taylor rushing yards. I thought that he was going to be able to cruise past the 62. He had 47, but he did make up for it through the air. He had 5 catches. But I still think this is a really good matchup for a running back. But the problem is, it's just, Foreman played 59% of the snaps and Roschon played 29% of the snaps. So I don't think that, even though this is a really good matchup, I will have Foreman ranked ahead of Roschon, but I don't think that it's somebody that you really want to trust at this moment. Like, you need W's. You may be desperate. You may have Mostert. You may have Swift. Maybe you're rolling Darrell Henderson, Pacheco. So you may need somebody to start. I will have Foreman ranked ahead, but he's not going to be a top play because even though the matchup is great, Carolina inside the top 5 fantasy points allowed, second most actually fantasy points allowed to running backs, and top 5 in rushing yards allowed and yards per carry and just overall points per game and things like that. It probably will be a bit of a desperation play there. I'd like to see more Roschon, but at the moment, we're just not seeing it. Adam Thielen, really the only Carolina Panther. I mean, Chuba Hubbard was announced the starter, and he was the starter, but we did see a little bit of work from Miles Sanders, caught a couple passes, but at the end of the day, Chuba played 65% of the snaps and Miles played 25%. So it is a good spot. It's like desperation play here. What did I just get for time? Did they just say that Heineke is not the starter anymore? Is that what they're doing here? Oh, he will remain the starter. So they're going to reevaluate after the bye. Arthur Smith, man, that guy is absolutely clueless. He's going to get fired this year because I don't think the Falcons are going to make the playoffs. And I just watch them. Anybody else like watching this Falcons team and just wondering what the heck? Why did they draft Bijan? And Bijan was a bust for us on the show because of Arthur Smith. And I took so much heat from everybody. Oh, you don't like rookies, rookie running back, Zeke and Saquon. Like, don't you understand football? Like, oh, obviously you don't watch football. They don't draft a guy in the first round not to use him. What? They're not using him. They're not using him at all. In the red zone, they're using Cordero Patterson and Tyler Algier. They can't find a way to get inside the red zone. Does Bijan Robinson have a rushing touchdown this season? Does he have one? I don't think he has one. He's got a couple receiving touchdowns. He's got one rushing touchdown. A running back that the fantasy community told me to pick 3rd overall. It has nothing to do with the talent, but look at these games. He's got one game with over 14 carries. 10 for 56, 19 for 124, his best game. 10 for 30, 10 for 33, 14 for a $105. That's a good game too. Like, give him the ball. 14 for 46, 13 for 37, 1 for 3. He had the flu. Quotation marks. 11 for 62, 11 for 51. 11 for 51. The guy has a 500 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, and it's not on him. It really isn't on him. I can't believe I watched the Falcons in the red zone 3 opportunities in a row from like the 5, and they didn't give him the ball once. They gave the ball to Algier, who got stuffed. He was 3 for -3 yards at like the midway point of the game. I don't know what to tell Bijan owners. You can't sell him. You can't sell him on, the pretty much one of the lowest peak or the lowest value at the moment of his whole season. You kind of just have to ride this thing out and hope that they just make the switch and lean on him a little bit more. I would say the quarterback play, like if Heineke can get London and they can move the ball a little bit more efficiently, then maybe that will open things up a little bit more. But I think Arthur Smith is going to get canned. I think he's going to get fired. And if this work continues, and they miss the playoffs, anyways, enough. I get too shook up over it.
Sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit.
Nice. Thank you, George. Anyways, he's probably a buy low candidate because I can't imagine who, if you have him, he's been a big pain in your butt because you took him so early. And he's not really performing. Like 10, 10.3, 12, 4.9 is just not good enough. But Arizona this week is such a good spot for him to kind of get right. So it may be a buy low opportunity. He's got the bye week 11. Out of the bye, week 12 against the Bucks is not a great matchup. Week 12 against the Saints, not a good matchup. Week 14 against the Bucks is not a good matchup. But come playoff time, week 15, 16, and 17, it doesn't get any better than that. Like Carolina's allowed the 2nd most fantasy points to backs. That's week 15. Indy's allowed the 5th most fantasy points to backs. That's week 16. The championship is the Bears week 7, or they've allowed the 7th most fantasy points to back. So you could probably get him from an owner and you just say, look, you need wins. You got the bye week 11. You can't afford to, start Joe Buck, on the bench. And then week 12 is the Saints, and then week 14 is the Bucks. So you have tough matchups. So I would check in on the owner and just to see, but I would just say proceed with caution. Like, he's not a top 5 running back like the fantasy community was telling you. But a little bit of a rant there, but I do believe he's a buy low candidate. Just Arthur Smith at the moment. Those matchups in the playoffs are phenomenal, but who knows? Maybe Tyler Algier racks up all the points. Anyways, Bears, like desperation plays, I would say, would be Foreman and would be Chuba Hubbard. You're playing Adam Thielen. And I don't think that the DJ Moore is a lock. I get it. Revenge, fun. The upside is there, but he's going to be a wide receiver 3 for me, not a 2. And I just don't think, according to reports, that Justin Fields will be ready to go here. So we'll see what happens when we check back in later in the week. The Colts and the Patriots here, it does still seem to be Ramondre Stevenson's backfield. 62% of the snaps and Zeke 39% of the snaps. Juju hardly played. It's a trap, guys. Don't get involved with Juju Smith-Schuster here. Demario Douglas did lead all Patriots in snaps. We did get his receiving yard prop. It wasn't a fantastic day from him, but he had 5 catches for 55 yards. We view that as like a flex play, a desperation play. You may need some wide receivers here this week with some pretty big names off the schedule. Downs was dealing with that knee injury, so we'll see and keep an eye on practice reports. And I think that's part of the reason why I wish they would have just ruled him out. You just had the one catch on one target there. Really didn't do a whole lot in that game. Didn't really need him to do a whole lot, but I would say that if he's practices in full, we can view him as like a flex play. We're rolling out Michael Pittman. I would play Ramondre. We're rolling out Jonathan Taylor, and again from Moss. 21% of the snaps. I think Moss season is officially over, and it's just like kind of desperation plays. 7 carries for 26 yards. And it's just going to see a downtick from him moving forward. Cleveland and Baltimore, this one should be a really good game. I don't think we'll see a lot of offensive points when these teams play inside the division. It's just, I don't want to say it's a snooze fest. It's just old school football, man. Like all these teams can bring it defensively. They're pretty good at stopping the run. I wouldn't imagine we see a lot of points here, but Zay Flowers will be in my lineup. Mark Andrews will be in my lineup. David Njoku could, the Ravens don't give up a lot to tight ends, but we did see McBride a couple weeks ago, have a good game against them. And I think Deshaun Watson being there, Deshaun Watson and Lamar won't be rock solid plays, but these are guys, especially Lamar, that just has that ceiling. So a really good test here for Cleveland. And I think Baltimore as well. Looking at that spread, I kind of lean like Cleveland just to keep this one close here at 6. But I would play Amari Cooper. I'd play Njoku. And, especially with Kelsey being out and then also Dallas Goedert with the fractured arm. You may need them. Saints and Vikings. I got a feeling I'll be back in the Saints again. Taysom Hill. We talked about Taysom Hill, and I still don't view him as a top 5 tight end, but he does have that upside. Obviously, I still think, since we're on this and tight ends, these are tight ends that I like more than Taysom Hill the rest of the season. Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, TJ Hawkinson, Sam Laporta. I still like George Kittle over him. And then he's in the conversation. Now that Goddard and Waller are no longer around, you got Evan Ingram there. I still like Dalton Kincaid more as well. So I would go Kelce, Andrews, Hawkinson. Actually, Hawkinson's been my guy over Andrews forever. And now that Dobbs is back, I'm going to continue to go that way. Seeing him have 12 targets, 7 grabs with Dobbs is great. And I think having the addition of Dobbs is great news for Hawkinson and Addison because it's still a pass-happy offense. Looking at some of our pace tools, and they'll be updated here, and we'll see the pace that Minnesota played. But Cam Akers got hurt, still not efficient running the rock. This is a team that they're number 1 in pass plays per 60. They're number 1 in terms of overall pass percentage, and they're top 5 in pace of play. So they like to play fast, and I don't think that will change with Dobbs. And bit of a downgrade from Kirk Cousins, but certainly an upgrade with what they would have rolled out with Hall. And I think it was a good first couple of drives, maybe being a little bit unfair there, and also being a little bit choppy on StreamYard, of course, because this is the time that it just gets choppy for me. But we're going to continue on here and rapid fire through the rest of the thoughts here. But Hawkinson, the tight ends the rest of the way for me. Kelsey, Hawkinson, Andrews. I'll go Kincaid, Laporta, Kincaid. Either way, top 5. Kittle, and then we're into and then we're right there with Taysom Hill, and he just finds a way to score a touchdown. He's a top 5 tight end. top 6 right now, currently at the moment. And he just back 3 games in a row with a touchdown. We had the rushing yard prop. He's got over 100 rushing yards in back-to-back games, 20 carries over the back-to-back games. Maybe he should just be the quarterback there. He's catching passes, he's throwing touchdowns. So he's just a weapon that they continue to use. So you play him if you need help at the tight end position. You play Hawkinson, you play Addison, you play Olave. Big 0 from Michael Thomas, but it is a much better spot. But just a flex play, I think, at best for Michael Thomas. We haven't really seen a whole lot of ceiling games from him. Over at Houston, CJ Stroud is in that QB1 conversation. I mean, he's been there for the past few weeks. He's started off his NFL career with like pretty good fantasy showings, like 20 points, I think, in 3 of the first 4 games. Bengals, I do like the Bengals defense. I thought they did some good things last night against Josh Allen, but you're playing Teehee, you're playing Mixon, you're playing Tank Dell, you're playing Nico Collins. This should be a fun game. I would play pretty much everybody in that game. San Fran and Jacksonville, same sort of deal. You could maybe have some better options than Ridley, but the ceiling is still pretty high there for Calvin Ridley. A tough spot here for Trevor Lawrence and company, but I would definitely be playing all of the weapons in this football game. We'll see if Deebo Samuel can get back there. Green Bay and Pittsburgh. Oh man, this one probably pretty ugly. I think I would only play Deontay Johnson and maybe Aaron Jones. The thing with Najee, it's like a low-end RB2 of flex. He still plays more snaps than Jaylen Warren. He gets the goal line work. He gets more carries, but Jaylen Warren looks better, looks fresher. He's like a flex play, catching a couple passes. Really hard to trust George Pickens. Just not enough volume for 2 wide receivers inside this offense. And Deontay Johnson, for sure, wide receiver 2, maybe wide receiver 3, and Pickens like desperation play. Not playing Christian Watson, not playing any Packer, really. Even AJ. I would play Jones because he does have the ceiling. It's a tough spot. Maybe he can catch a couple passes. Wouldn't play Love. Don't want to play Pickens. Tennessee and Tampa here. Phillips may be a deep league pickup here. Somebody maybe that you can roster. I don't know if I would play him, but seeing what we have seen against the Bucks, right? And the Bucks and what we just saw. And we did address this a little bit when we talked about Nico Collins in the last show, just about the overall matchup for Nico Collins. And I don't have the updated numbers because they'll get updated after tonight. But heading into the week, the Bucks top 10 in yards allowed, 5th most passing yards allowed, top 10 in quarterback completion percentage, top 10 in fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks and to wide receivers, top 10 in yards per attempt allowed. And then Stroud just kind of picked them apart. Not kind of, he did late in the game and in the second half. So one thing I did notice here in the Titans game, the last time they played, which was on Thursday Night Football against the Pittsburgh Steelers, we can roll out Hopkins, but maybe, of course, with the injury to Treylon Burks, maybe we can roll out Kyle Phillips in like a deep league, the 20-team league that we heard from earlier. Maybe it's like he back-to-back games, the last 2 games, 8 targets, 7 grabs, just about 100 yards, just over 90. And now against the Bucks, it's possible. I'm not saying in a single, I would say like not your standard 12-team league, maybe not, but in a deeper format, potentially, maybe somebody we can dive into when it comes to some of the props as well for Kyle Phillips. So it's not a lot of waiver wire pickups here this week, but I mean, you could be in a tough spot with a lot of these like stud wide receivers. There's a lot of really good wide receivers that are sitting this week. So keep an eye on him. Maybe Will Levis is a super flex play as a top 12, top 20 pick there. Baker was good. Baker had a good game. Godwin and Evans, you're playing them, and a great game from Rashad White. It was really nice to see. Played over 80% of the snaps. He's just getting all of the work, but unfortunately, this hasn't been super efficient, and it's a tough defense this week. So I just a mid to low end RB2. The Falcons and Cardinals, again, Bijan, I mean, you just roll him out. I'd like to see Pitts get the ball. It was Daryl Hodge getting a lot of the work. Van Jefferson out there a lot, but overall not getting a ton of work there. So he's somebody that I would consider maybe in just deep leagues for Hodge, but don't love it. But the matchup is pretty good. And on the other side, it's just maybe you can just play Hollywood this week. We'll see if Kyler comes back. If Kyler comes back, actually, that's my bold take, is that Kyler is a Falcon. So I think he's playing his future squad here this week. Maybe he rips them apart. So I would play if Kyler plays, you play Kyler. He'd be a top 12 quarterback. And then you can play Hollywood Brown there. And Trey McBride, I think maybe top 12. I'll probably have him borderline top 12 there. Detroit and Los Angeles. So we'll see what happens here tonight. But yeah, Sam Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's really, I'll be excited to see what kind of usage Donovan Peoples-Jones gets. I think the addition is bad news for Jameson Williams. But yeah, Amon-Ra, you're rolling out. We'll see if Montgomery can come back here. Jameer Gibbs, you're playing. Eckler, Keenan Allen, you're playing. We'll see what kind of game Quentin Johnson has, but it'll be a tough matchup tonight, and it'll be a tough matchup next week for him as well. And if Josh Palmer is ready to go, we'll have to keep an eye on that situation. Washington and Seattle, another good game from Dotson. Found the end zone. It's taken some time, but it's been a good couple weeks in a row for Jahan Dotson. Seattle's defense played okay, like hung around as much as they could in the first half of that game. Then Baltimore, it was just no test in the second half. But Jahan Dawson, Terry, dud game is what Bill Belichick does. So those guys, I think he can play. Brian Robinson Jr. And then on the Seattle side, there's one of my takeaways from the week, and I don't know how healthy Ken Walker is at the moment. But this is back-to-back weeks now where we've seen a little bit of run from Zach Charbonnet. So Kenneth Walker at 9 for 16, the week before 8 for 66, and then Zach Charbonnet 4 for 8. So it's like, wow, I mean, didn't blow you away. But the week before 5 for 53. But the snap counts were in favor of Zach Charbonnet. He finishes with 55% of the snaps to Walker's 49% of the snaps. So maybe it's something that's happening here is like maybe a bit of a timeshare, but Charbonnet should be owned. He should be rostered. And just in case in the second half here, he gets a little bit more run. Look at this spread. Has this changed, George? You did this morning. 16 for the Dallas Cowboys. Oh my goodness. It's one of the largest spreads I've seen in quite some time. I think there was like some 17s past couple years. I mean, they beat them 40-0 to start the season. They can't score. They can't move the ball. Guys played the Raiders, and they couldn't move the ball. I think the Raiders were feeling pretty good. That was one we got pretty easily. But, yeah, I mean, the Giants are dead last in yards per game, dead last in passing yards per game, dead last in points per game. Whew, 16. Ferguson, if you guys didn't believe me last week, you believe me now. Part of it was the matchup, but he is the number 2 option for Dak Prescott, and that's very valuable, because Tony Pollard has not been able to run the football. I would say that Pollard probably finds the end zone. I mean, he's only had one game with a touchdown, and it did come against the Giants in week 1. He's only had one game with over 72 rushing yards too. So maybe this is a spot where you're like, finally, maybe Pollard can have a 22-25 fantasy point showing. CD can't be stopped, but this game's going to get out of hand. I would still play CD, obviously, and Dak, and maybe we'll see a little bit more. It was Tolbert had a pretty good game, but Slay was on Cooks and Bradbury was on Gallup. Maybe that was part of it, but Tolbert was maybe somebody in deep leagues, but it's probably just a one-off there. 16 points. I think Dallas covers, don't you guys? The Jets and the Raiders, Jacobs, nice game. We had Jacobs, heading into the week, 70 rushing yards was the lowest in the NFL. That was what the Raiders were averaging per game, but we did see the Jacobs kind of pop off there. And Adams, I mean, we can't say that Adams, like, you hear it in the community all the time. Adams is going to go off now. He's going to go off. They fired everybody and Jimmy's sitting. It's not that simple. Like, don't you think that the Raiders want to get the ball to Devontae Adams? Great, but they just don't have the personnel. Right? O'Connell's just not a good quarterback, and they're going to lean on Jacobs down the stretch as much as they can. I don't feel great about Adams the rest of the season. I don't feel great about Jacoby Myers the rest of the season either, and I'm not going to like any of these guys in this matchup against the Jets. It's going to be a tough game for those 2 wide receivers. I will like Garrett Wilson. I will like Breece Hall. It's tough for me to say here and say, like, sit Devontae Adams, but I would try to find some other options, to be honest. It's not, you play him because the ceiling is there. You hope that he finds the end zone, but it's not a good spot for him, to say the least. And then the Bills and the Broncos, maybe Gabe Davis will find the end zone. Shakir's getting more looks. Dalton Kincaid, love it, right? We're seeing the true potential on Dalton Kincaid. And the Bills secondary is not fantastic, man. Lately, they're really missing Milano, Tre'Davious White. They haven't been great defensively, so maybe you can roll out Cortland Sutton. Jerry Jeudy didn't get traded, but maybe Javonte Williams as a flex play there. I'm really frozen, so I'm going to put this up for a second. My audio sounds good, right, George? I'm going to put this up for a second. We'll figure out StreamYard moving forward, but I'm going to get out of here on this with some NHL stuff for you guys over this board, so I'm not frozen. Actually taking a lot to bring up the board, so I'll just kind of to mention them with you guys. Quinn Hughes, over 2.5 shots at -140. And I like the assist for Quinn Hughes at -130. And this is a little bit of juice here on both of these plays. But Quinn Hughes is he's among the leaders in ice time. He continues to log a ton of ice. He's got 3+ shots in 9 of his 11 games this season. He's racked up 12 assists in his 11 games. We get a high total game here of 7 between the Canucks and the Edmonton Oilers. And I will probably see the over, honestly. I think we'll see a lot of offense. Not great goaltending happening with the Edmonton Oilers at the moment. And the Canucks are among the leaders in penalties taken as well. So I like Evan Bouchard here tonight at over 2.5 shots at -105. And I like the point at -125. Also +120 for the assists for Evan Bouchard. He's got 10 points in 10 games. He's on that first power play. He's also logging a lot of ice time as well. 7 assists on the season for him. And for the shots, he played the Canucks in the first 2 games of the season. He racked up 10 total shots. He's been shooting a lot. He kind of is that trigger man. Him and Draisaitl on that power play. Nugent Hopkins and Connor McDavid just want to pass the puck. Evan Rodriguez over 2.5 shots here. He's got 4+ shots in 7 of his 10 games. It's either 0 or 4 shots. It's 3 games. 3 of his 10 games, he's got 0 shots. And 7 of the 10, he's got at least 4 shots. Can we just get 3? I'll be happy with 4, but let's get 3 here today. -130, a matchup against the Columbus Blue Jackets inside the top 10, actually inside the top 5, and allowing shot attempts, shots at 5 and 5 per 60. It's a really nice spot. Florida at home here tonight. And then I'm going with the 2 Leafs. There's a lot going on with Toronto. The sky is falling in Toronto, and I love it. I'm here for it. The fact that they're tied with the Habs in the standings on November 6th is not what you want to see if you're a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. There's talk in the dressing room. They're having meetings, and it's just a fragile hockey team. It really is. I like the Lightning to go in and win the game, plus money tonight. Both teams are actually allowing quite a bit at 5 and 5. Tampa's allowing a little bit more, but I like William Nylander here at over 3.5 shots at -130. His last 4 games, 5 shots, 7, 5, and 7. He has at least 4 shots in 8 of his 11 games this season. He played the Bolts earlier in the year, and he put 6 pucks on net. He had 10 attempts. And then Austin Matthews, 4.5 shots at plus money here at +1. It's moved a little bit at +110 this morning when I put it in. Matthews, he goes through these up and down moments when it comes to goals. He had Hattie again the other night. He started off with a Hattie, just back-to-back games, the hat trick. But I like him tonight. He's shooting again at over 4.5 +100. I think we'll see some urgency in the Leafs game, but I do believe that Tampa will find a way to win the hockey game. So there are the props. George, I think that's it. If you want to get ready to get me out again, there wasn't a whole lot in terms of waiver wire stuff. Maybe just leave this board up for a second and I'll roll through, since we have some people in here, some potential quarterback streamers if you can't get some of these other guys. So I'll just go in terms of matchups. CJ Stroud should be owned at this point, but his ownership is 76%. That would be the guy I would go to first. Then Sam Howell at 62%. Sam Howell, 18, 31, 18, 26, 19, 21, 16. Every fantasy showing -2 have been really, really good. 1 game against the Bills and 1 game against the Giants, who actually have had a pretty good showing in terms of pass defense over the past couple weeks. Those would be the 2 quarterbacks that I would look at first. Then even Deshaun Watson, I would try to find a way to roster him. I don't love the spot this week. I would play CJ Stroud and Sam Howell over him. But after the Ravens, you get Pittsburgh, Denver, the Rams, Jacksonville, and Chicago, Houston into the playoffs. So some pretty good matchups moving forward. Maybe Brock Purdy was dropped. I don't mind him. Geno Smith against Washington. Baker Mayfield against Tennessee. I like Baker against Tennessee. I'm going to like him more than Deshaun Watson this week. Of course, Kyler, his ownership is only 59%. So he's a guy to consider as well. I would probably just try to stay away from Taylor Heineke. 16 fantasy points is okay. The matchup is better. It's like a desperation thing if you need him. I would play him over Bryce Young. I would play him over Russell Wilson, Mac Jones, Jordan Love, Kenny Pickett, Gardner Minshew as well. Gardner Minshew in New England against Bill and the Patriots. I don't love that spot either. So Heineke, I'd play over some of those other guys. It's like a super flex play only for me, and you hope that Drake London does come back. As for streaming defenses here, let's see. We got Seattle at 41% against Washington. Against Baltimore, this is a tough spot, but they've had double-digit fantasy points in 3 games this season. They do have 6 picks, a couple touchdowns there. Not really among the leaders in sacks, but we know that Sam Howell is on his butt quite a bit. So that is a decent streaming option. I even think Tampa against the Titans, I think, is okay. Like, the defense hasn't been that great, but maybe a couple mistakes potentially from Will Levis. The same sort of deal with Chicago against Carolina. Like, those just desperation plays there. I don't mind the Raiders against the Jets. That's certainly a defense that can get some pressure on the quarterback. They had 8 sacks yesterday. A part of that, of course, a big part of that is the Giants. On the other side, Tennessee against Tampa Bay, not a bad one. I think Cincinnati against the Texans, even though CJ Stroud, I don't mind that one. I like some of the matchups moving forward there for the Bengals, maybe to get right. New England's a good one against Minshew and the Indianapolis Colts. Their ownership is 55% in Yahoo. I think the Packers may be an okay one as well against the Steelers. Just a couple decent options there. The Detroit Lions at 31% ownership, that's way too low. Way too low. I would pick them up actually ahead of a lot of the teams that I just mentioned if you're looking for like a long-term play down the stretch, because Chargers in week 10 is not great, but it's okay. That after that, though, like the Bears, the Packers, the Saints, the Packers again, then the Broncos, those are some really good matchups. I would try to do what I could to roster the Detroit Lions kind of moving forward. And if you need a tight end this week with maybe some injuries and some good ones on bye, Taysom Hill, up at the top at 64%, if you didn't pick him up last week, that's the guy. McBride here. We were really worried about the matchup against Cleveland and Clayton Tune, but moving forward, there's some decent ones, and Kyler coming back under center. So maybe he'll get dropped because people are just so living the moment now at the tight end position. One good week and then bad, so they may drop him. You can pick him up. Logan Thomas is a guy that I still like. He's got at least 4 catches in 3 straight games, and he's got 3 touchdowns on the season. I like him against Seattle this week. Dalton Schultz should definitely be rostered. His ownership is really low. I'm not there on Jonnu Smith, but it's like a desperation type deal. 5 for 100 and a touchdown. It's possible. Maybe Gerald Everett in a deep league, but I think I'd rather take the upside on a Luke Musgrave in that scenario, that situation. I'm not going to go down the road of Daniel Bellinger or Irv Smith, even though Irv Smith did have a touchdown last week. Michael Mayer, just don't like the matchup next week against the Jets, and I don't like the quarterback play there. So I think the big tight end pickups, really, if you haven't, if Taysom Hill, Trey McBride gets dropped, Logan Thomas, Dalton Schultz, like make sure these guys are rostered. I would rank them Hill, McBride, actually Hill, Schultz, McBride, and then get into Logan Thomas. And then you're really just, you're looking for some desperation plays there. Cade Otton actually sneaky good over the last 3 weeks, got 15 grabs over the last 3 weeks, 70 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. So he is a guy that I would consider if you had Kelsey, some of these other names I mentioned not available to you, and you had, maybe you're rolling out Higbee. If you're rolling out Higbee, those other guys are probably already snatched up. But Dallas Goedert going to be out for the next 4 weeks or so. Pretty tough stuff there. Again, I think I went over all the running backs. It's just not a lot there at this time of the season. It's really just all about stashes. Make sure Zeke and Justice Hill and Zach Charbonnet are stashed. Anyone drops, Miles Sanders, Dameon Pierce, just kind of have these guys stashed. Like Warren's, it's no good of me coming in here every week and saying Warren's ownership is under 60%. It's just, you guys are well aware by now. You have all these guys stashed. I think the big one to pick up would be Keaton Mitchell. We've talked about him being in stash, 9 for $138 and a touchdown last week, and Justice Hill playing more snaps than Gus Edwards. Like Gus Edwards is the goal line back, and he may score a touchdown every single week the rest of the way. It's just, but 18% of the snaps, Hill 63% of the snaps, and then Mitchell at 18% of the snaps. So tied there with Gus. That game was out of hand. Give him a little bit more run, but he has a ton of speed. I think he's got a higher ceiling than Gus Bus and Justice Hill. So he's a guy that you definitely want to have on your radar. All right, we're out of here. George, send me out, ftmbets.com, looking for some more NHL plays and some NFL plays as well. Hit me up if you guys have any fantasy football questions, and we'll be back later in the week to tee up the Thursday night football game between the Panthers and the Bears. Tonight, I'm going to say 17-14 final for the Chargers. Jets cover. Chargers better win. Their season's over if they don't. Jets cover, and we get Eckler catches and rush plus receiving combined. We get Garrett Wilson catches and Breece Hall receiving yards in the fun little same game parlay with 4+ catches and 25+ receiving yards for George to win all kinds of money. All right, ready here. Have a good one. Cheers.
Hi, I'm Chris from Greenwood, and this is My Nova Scotia. Enjoy amazing live music around Halifax at the TD Halifax Jazz Festival, July 8th to the 16th. From July 17th to the 24th, it's the Halifax Pride Festival. And if you're like me, you can never get enough golf. It's the best way to see some of Nova Scotia's most beautiful scenery. Visit novascotia.com to plan your vacation. Our greens are awesome. So when are you coming?